J.D. Vance or J.P. Mandel or whatever other one of the various names he's gone by, that guy, he has started doing some television interviews, and these have gone really poorly. As uncharismatic as he has been when answering reporter questions in a less formal setting and these sort of like shout your questions up kind of environments or mini press conference environments before or after events, the sit-down interviews with J.D. Vance are genuinely bad. And it is yet another reason which I can only assume has the Trump campaign in panic mode about how do we either hide this guy or do we need to actually replace him? Dana Bash on CNN sat down with J.D. Vance and said, Donald Trump alleged that Kamala Harris became black. Do you believe Kamala Harris is black? And J.D. doesn't answer by saying, yeah, she's black. He answers simply by saying, she's whatever she claims to be.
A number of years ago, she happened to turn black. Her father is Jamaican. Do you believe Kamala Harris is black?
I believe that Kamala Harris is whatever she says she is, but I believe importantly that President Trump is right that she's a chameleon. She pretends to be one thing in front of one audience. She pretends to be something different in front of another audience. Look, Dana, she's not running a political campaign. She's running a movie. She only speaks to voters behind a teleprompter. Everything is scripted. She doesn't have her policy positions out there. She has an number of...
All right, so we're going to be dealing with a bunch of those claims. But it's very ironic in a tragic way to hear J.D. Vance talking about Kamala Harris as the chameleon, given that he's had 3 or 4 different names, given that the J.D. Vance that he claims he is in his book Hillbilly Elegy, which I actually read, by the way. You can tell when Trump talks about the book, he's never read it. He has no idea what's in it. The J.D. Vance that J.D. claims he is in his book Hillbilly Elegy has absolutely zero to do with the sort of Peter Thiel associated Silicon Valley libertarian tech guy persona that he appears to actually have. Chameleon is a funny thing for him to say. And finally, it's funny for him to say, given the completely non-believable 180 that he has done on Trump and that his wife has supposedly done on Trump. He's really the chameleon. But these interviews actually get even worse. You may recall that Donald Trump had dinner once with white supremacist Nick Fuentes. J.D. Vance previously has criticized Nick Fuentes. The topic came up. It's not a good moment for J.D. Vance. This is during an ABC News interview with Jonathan Karl.
So there's been a lot of talk about racism and whatnot. You faced some really nasty stuff. I saw this thing that Nick Fuentes, of course, he's an avowed white supremacist. He said, what kind of a man marries somebody named Usha? Clearly he doesn't value his racial identity, his heritage. I mean, this is racist garbage.
Yes, it is.
But this is also a guy that dined with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago during this campaign.
Well, and Donald Trump doesn't know anything about and frankly doesn't care for. But yeah, look.
Yeah, they sat some kid down at Trump's table. Trump knew nothing about it.
My attitude to these people attacking my wife is she's beautiful, she's smart. What kind of man marries Usha? A very smart man and a very lucky man, importantly. Yeah. And my views, look, if these guys want to attack me or attack my views, my policy views, my personality, come after me. But don't attack my wife. She's out of your league.
But, I mean, that dinner that Trump had, and of course it was Kanye West, the guy that's praised Hitler, who arranged it all. That was back a year and a half ago, and Trump still hasn't given a full-throated denouncement of this guy who said that terrible stuff, but he said, I mean, he's a white supremacist.
Look, I think President Trump has issued plenty of condemnations on this. The one thing that I like...
Fuentes,
yeah, he has not.
The one thing I like about Donald Trump, John, is that he actually will talk to anybody, but just because you talk to somebody doesn't mean you endorse their views. And look, I mean, Donald Trump spent a lot of quality time with my wife. Every time he sees her, he gives her a hug, tells her she's beautiful, and jokes around with her a little bit. I'm not at all worried about Donald Trump.
Forget about the fact that he hasn't denounced the white supremacist he had dinner with. He's polite to my Indian wife whenever he sees her. J.D. Vance is very much not good at this. Let's look at one more from CNN and then one more from ABC News. Here is Dana Bash on CNN with regard to who is valid as a parent, which is a big topic for J.D. Vance. Did you try to have kids or not determines whether you're a childless cat lady worthy of praise or condemnation. Dana Bash brings up, listen, Kamala Harris only has stepchildren. Pete Buttigieg is a gay man who has adopted twins. Are they equally parents in the mold that JD has determined is appropriate? Let's listen to his answer.
You called out Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg in particular. Kamala Harris has 2 stepchildren. Pete Buttigieg and his husband have adopted twins. Do you recognize them as parents and more broadly as being part of families?
Well, of course I do, Dana. I mean, you know my life story. I was actually raised. I was raised, but Dana, I was raised. I mean,
by name.
You called them out by name, but you, of course, recognize them as parents. Tell me more, JD.
The first people that I gave a hug to after my RNC convention speech was my stepmom, who's been an incredibly important person in my life.
So she's not childless.
My kids call her Mamaw. Of course she's not childless, but again,
you called her that.
The criticism, I certainly did not call my own stepmother childless.
Kamala Harris.
I criticized Kamala Harris for being part of a set of ideas that exists in American leadership that is anti-family. I never, Dana, criticized people for not having kids. I criticize people for being anti-child. And I do think that Kamala Harris has made some bizarre statements. She has said things like, it's reasonable not to have children over climate change. I think it's the exact opposite message we should be sending to our young families. I want to expand the child tax credit. I want to stop those surprise medical bills. I want to make housing more affordable so that if you have a young family, you can actually afford to put them in a home. And I think that it is unfortunate that so much of our public leadership has become anti-family.
So not really addressing the question as usual in any way at all. He was then confronted about the same thing over on ABC, and he kind of tried to write off suggesting that parents should have more voting rights than non-parents by saying it was a thought experiment coming from the party that is very rarely doing any thought experiment.
All right, let's focus on something that's gotten a lot of attention. I mean, you know, this cat ladies comment. You talk about Democrat Party dominated by childish cat ladies.
Right.
Put that aside. You also made a policy proposal.
Yes.
Which was why Tucker Carlson had you on for that interview. And you said you advocated giving extra votes to people with children, which seems a little...
Well, John, it's not a policy proposal. It's a thought experiment, right?
He just said, yes, I do have a policy proposal, but now I'm calling it a thought experiment 7 seconds later.
Democrats said we should give children the right to vote. Some Democrats had said we're going to give children the right to vote. And I said, well, if we're going to give the rights to the children, then we should actually just allow the parents to cast those votes, right? I trust a parent more with a decision like that than I do, say, a 14-year-old. So it's a thought experiment. There are, though, policy positions behind my view that the country should become more pro-family, right? One thing I learned as a dad is after our second child we brought home, we have 3 little kids.
After we bought our second home,
we got these ridiculous surprise medical billings from the hospital because we had chosen an out-of-network provider, of course, at this most stressful of all imaginable moments. I've actually introduced legislation to stop moms and dads from having to go through those surprise medical billings. We want to expand the child tax credit. There's so much that we want to do, John.
You know what's funny? The issue of getting a bill because you went out of network, that's not really about a surprise. That's a proactive choice. That's a very privileged example of a surprise bill, because many people have plans where you're just not allowed to go out of network, right? Depending on whether you have a point of care plan or an HMO, it's a very common thing that no one would even think to go out of network. Why? Out of network, I have an HMO. That's not even a possibility. What are you talking about? That's not even really the crux of the surprise medical bill that most surprise medical billing proposals are meant to address. Although it would be great if people could go out of network with more plans. And JD Vance is trying to pivot. He does like 4 things wrong. He doesn't really address the substance of the question. He tries to pivot, but he pivots to something that is not really an issue for most people because they actually have worse, more basic issues that need to be dealt with regard to plans. He shows to some degree a level of privilege in that that's something that he chose to do. It's a mess. This guy is really not good at this. And then finally, who's your favorite vice president? Doesn't do great with this one.
You've said that Donald Trump is the greatest president of your lifetime.
He is.
Who,
painfully stupid thing to say,
in your mind, is the greatest vice president of your lifetime?
It's a good question. I haven't thought much about that. I think George W. Bush George H.W. Bush did a very good job as vice president. You could pick a number of guys who've done a perfectly fine job, but the president really sets the tone for policy, and I think a lot more about the president than about the vice president. And fundamentally, my role in the administration is to support him in enacting the agenda. That's what I'm going to work on.
Trump was asked recently very directly, would you be ready to be president on day one?
Sure.
When he arrived. And it was notable that he didn't answer the question. Instead, what he said is the vice presidential candidate doesn't matter. I mean, what did you make when you heard him not answer that directly?
Well, he said that a million times, both in private and in public.
But he's asked really directly,
right.
Are you ready?
Most people, oh, come on, John. He's right. Most people, 99% of the country, they don't vote on who the vice presidential nominee. They're voting for Donald Trump or for Kamala Harris, not for JD or Tim Walz, right? But what I think that he does believe, because he made it the main focus of his vetting process, is, do I think this person can be president on day one if, God forbid, something happens? Yes. So I absolutely...
Yeah, except he didn't know. He hasn't said yes once. The funny thing is, JD goes, at the end of the day, what matters here is that he believes I can be president on day one. He's now been asked that multiple times, and he hasn't said yes at all. So the JD Vance interviews, a disaster, everything going wrong. Let's now check in on Tim Walz.